Good morning.
Hola. Buenos dias.
Thanks for spending some time with me this morning. So I'm going to ask you if you'd introduce yourself.
My name is Kimberly Dummons. I live in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and I'm originally from Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
What do you do?
I teach at Middle Tennessee State University, and I teach mostly foundations courses, which are 2D, 3D design. A lot of freshmen take those courses, plus art majors, art minors, and students out of other departments.
But what do you really do?
Try not to fall off the wagon. I'm just kidding. I got jokes. I make sculpture and I do some printmaking.
So I think, we talked a bit before this call about our Parsons Intensive, and my group of 4 were working on a New York City institution, and we chose art. And some of that is about traditional arts institutions, but also about public art. And so immediately I thought about you. I showed you the Lionel Smith sculpture that's currently in Union Square. I thought about your sculpture that's in Armstrong Park in New Orleans. And so I wanted to hear from you about the process of developing that piece and about public art, making it more accessible.
Okay, where do you want me to start?
Start with your piece and your work.
All right. I was offered a commission to do this sculpture in Armstrong Park, and it was a plan for multiple pieces to go into that park. So he had this big idea about increasing the community coming into that space. There's already a Louis Armstrong sculpture there by Elizabeth Catlett, which is huge and kind of awesome. And then he said he was asking Catlett if she would put another piece out in that park, and he was still developing a list of what other artists were going to be out there, but he had ideas for the themes he wanted to work with. And so he's working out of, I guess, jazz iconography and the history of that jazz music in New Orleans. And so he wanted to know if I wanted to do a piece about Buddy Bolden, who is considered the first jazz improvisational musician. And he played cornet. I did a little bit of research. His time period is late 1800s into the early 1900s. So I did some research. I developed a maquette. I got the maquette approved, which is a small version of what I planned for the larger piece. I sent that maquette to a foundry in Arizona. They increased the scale and actually modeled it out in clay for me. I went in and did the detail work. They did the molds, they did the waxes and cast it for me. They assembled it for me, which is great because they're really professional. That's their job. That's what they do. So I went in and finished the last of the pieces because I had to do a little bit of the detail work on the metal pieces. Then they put a patina on it. I got to paint the inside because the outside has a traditional patina color where bronze is usually like a yellow. I chose sort of a reddish tone to go around the whole piece, which is kind of dark, to age it to sort of match the Armstrong that was already in the park. And then I painted this interior section where you could still access this interior sort of relief on the form, similar to the paint color and texture of my professor.
So Kim, if I could interrupt you for a minute, a couple of things. You referred to he, the person who was coordinating artists in the park. Who was he?
The mayor of New Orleans at the time.
So the mayor was initiating this.
Yes.
Okay, these installations. You also mentioned that Elizabeth Catlett has a piece that's already on display. Who's Elizabeth Catlett?
Elizabeth Catlett was a sculptor. She wasn't originally from New Orleans, but she'd been through New Orleans. She was showing in New Orleans. She's passed away since then. She was like in her 90s, but she's a sculptor and a printmaker, big time African-American artist.
And so in the park, there's a multi-generational element of artists who have work presented in the park at this point?
Yeah, yeah.
And so he, the mayor, this was Mayor Nagin at the time?
Yeah, yeah.
He was interested in attracting traffic to the park, or?
Yeah, I think it's the one sort of bit of his legacy he wanted to leave for the community, and that park didn't get a whole lot of visitors. So there was the Armstrong out there, and it was only over to maybe the Congo Square area where people would actually pass through and have celebrations. They would do a lot of drumming and dancing, specifically in the Congo Square section of Armstrong Park. Then the other part of the park where there's this waterway, people didn't really pass through. There wasn't a whole lot of greenery or access for people to want to go in that section.
So a couple of questions come to mind. One, I mean, I want to hear what your definition of public art is. How do you define public art?
It's art that's accessible by the public, where you don't, in some cases, you have to pay a fee because they charge you to get into the space, but typically I understand that that fee covers the maintenance of the space. So, for example, there's a public space in Nashville called Cheekwood. And so they have a small museum space, but they actually have a sculpture trail with about 15 to 20 pieces on it. And the community can just come in and see that work, and it's part of the environment. When I think about public art, it's art that anyone in the public can pass and see and access and look at, deal with in whatever way they want to deal with.
Okay, because I'm hearing, of course, the mayor is an elected public official, and he's expending public dollars for a public purpose in a public space, publicly owned space that's Armstrong Park. Free admission, as you mentioned. And do you know if there were any studies about traffic, if there was increased use of the park related to the installation of more artwork? Do you know if there were any studies, or do you know anything about that at all?
I don't know if there are any studies, but when I look online, maybe sometimes to find a photo of that piece to see what it looks like now, because tourists pass through and they take photos of different things and they post them online. So every once in a while, I'll go looking for that sculpture so I can show, oh yeah, this is a piece I did in the park. I can tell how it's aged. And I noticed that in the photos, there are people in the shots, where when I would pass through that park just to look at the Armstrong or to go for some type of event at Congo Square, there was very little activity out in that space. So I would presume there was more tourism happening in that area, but I'm not there and I haven't looked at any numbers.
I think, is there anything else you want to say about public art or making art more accessible?
I think we don't have enough of it. Some areas seem to appreciate having that access more than other places. They're willing to put money into that thing because they find it important. I like going to Chicago because there's an artist there named Richard Hunt. And Richard Hunt makes these huge metal pieces. He's got a huge studio, but he's prolific, and Chicago supports his work. So you can find multiple pieces of Richard Hunt's work in Chicago, I guess in the same way John Scott is found in multiple places around New Orleans. They seem to appreciate having that thing, and not all of his work looks the same. So you wouldn't necessarily know one Scott from another Scott because they're colored different, they're shaped different. So I think it's nice, you go to San Francisco and you're walking down the street and there's more public art, more things to see to engage you in a space. Some areas don't have that same appreciation.
Well, I think that just about sums it up. Thanks so much for your time. I look forward to seeing you again when either I pass through Tennessee or you come back home.
I'll be home, I think, for spring break.
Okay. Well, have a good one, and let's talk again soon.
Will do. Thank you.
Take care.
You too.